Hello, my name is Rob Simpson and welcome to Directors Uncut. If this is your first episode, we put filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from body horror sweethearts to leading lights of silent cinema. Then we turn it into a lottery of directors, and by using a random number generator, we pick a name out of the hat. Whatever name comes out, myself and guest host discuss them and their work through 2 films. Before we introduce who they are, this is a cutting from the Patreon. So it's got a new section at the end to look forward to. It's not all a year old. So this would have been about June 2021 that this was originally recorded. So maybe there's some references in here which date it a little bit. But generally, when you're talking about a filmmaker as retro as this, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. So let's just jump into the recorded earlier segment and introduce who I have been joined by this week.
Graham Williamson.
And Aidan Fatkin.
Hello. How are we all doing this week?
Not so bad. Yes, we should give listeners a bit of an introduction to Aidan in case this is their first time hearing him on a podcast, I think. Aidan has been with us since the very early days of Cinema Eclectica, and you've popped up a couple of times on Pop Screen as well.
That's correct. It's old school trio right now.
I don't mean to humiliate Rob unduly, but his emails about organising this did include the phrase "get the band back together" at one point.
Oh, whoa, private, Graham, private.
I thought it was cute.
So does that make me the bassist?
Was that the Spinal Tap gag where the bassist kept dying?
It was the drummer who kept dying in Spinal Tap, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good film.
That's a very good film.
Yeah. Otherwise, though, how are things with us all? We're all good? We're all groovy?
I'm fine. As good as a man who's just watched 2 genuinely psychedelic French animations in quick succession can be.
Yep, same here.
Yeah, it's kind of a baptism of fire, isn't it? I mean, usually there's some sort of, hook to get involved with a film. Whereas this, it's just kind of like, you've been kicked out into the wilds and your gruff, wilderness dad says, go on, figure it out as you go.
Yes, and also your gruff wilderness dad is enormous and blue.
Yes. Yes, but Rennie the Lou, I'm guessing this is kind of the first exposure, because he's not the sort of director you just happen upon by accident, is he, really?
No, not really. Am I right in saying this? He's only had 3 major feature films.
I think that's true, yeah.
So he's the most productive of people, yeah. Well, that's a really harsh way of wording it. He didn't have the most productive of crazies. He's not one of these directors where we get 100 movies and we're like, okay, so where do we start here then?
This is definitely the first episode of Directors Lottery where we have done over 50% of the director's output in one show.
Yeah. But even before this, not exposure with a director, I think this guy is one of 2 French animation directors I've ever seen anything by.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the other one's called.
Sylvain and Chamae.
Yeah, is that Triplets of Belleville the Illusionist?
Yes, that's the guy, yeah.
Yeah, and couldn't be more different, honestly.
No, that's very true. Sylvain Chamae is lovely. I think his style is very sort of warm and caricatured and hand-drawn, and this is very much, very stylistically different.
Perdide ne serait pas désagréable s'il n'y avait pas ces frelons. Vous avez entendu parler des frelons de Perdide, princesse? Tenez, regardez. C'est les frelons de Perdide qui m'ont fait ça dans le temps. Ils adorent sucer le cerveau humain. Ils le dégustent comme un œuf à la coque.
Monsieur Silbad, je vous en prie.
Oh, désolé, prince. Voyons, que disais-tu, Jafar, ton ami Claude?
Claude avait un fils qui s'appelait Piel.
Un fils? Comme si ça ne suffisait pas d'avoir une femme, mais un fils aussi. Ah, je te le dis, Jafar, ton ami est fou.
Il est mort.
Oh, les frelons, hein? La femme aussi et le gamin?
Non, Piel s'est réfugié dans un delong. Tant qu'il sera dans la forêt des delongs, il ne risque rien. Le pollen tombant des arbres chasse les frelons.
Il y a des colons dans le coin?
Non, Piel est totalement seul sur Perdide.
Quel âge a-t-il?
Oh, il doit avoir entre 5 et 10 années terriennes.
Et le seul lien avec lui, c'est ce micro, hein?
Yeah, let's jump into it, shall we? Should we start with Which one do you want to start with first?
I don't know. Should we give Aidan the casting vote because you're new here, I guess?
Shall we start? I mean, my first one was Time Masters, so shall we do Time Masters first and then do the bigger hit, which is Fantastic Planet later?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I watched Time Masters first because I had actually seen Fantastic Planet fairly recently when it was first on Mubi. So, yeah.
Yeah, I saw Fantastic Planet very recently, last year as well, so it's not...
Either way you split it, this is a guy who... you're basically going to sound like a raving lunatic when you try and describe the plot of either film.
I hadn't thought about how amazing the plot synopses were going to be for these, yes.
And Gray mentioned in the last episode how he really enjoyed a previous Cinema Critic episode of talking about David Lynch. He said,
yes.
He enjoyed it when he says, so go on, explain Mulholland Drive then. I was like, oh, hell, how do I do that? This is even worse. Time Masters, I don't even know where to begin to describe what Time Masters is about.
Yeah, I genuinely cannot explain the plot for this movie. It's about a kid who gets stranded on an alien planet, right? I've got that much.
It's about a kid with his dad Claude who's on this alien planet. They're on this weird sort of spider-legged moon rover thing. The kid's called Peel. Something's chasing them. I don't really know what. He crashes, but he's talking to a microphone, like this egg-shaped microphone. And he's sending a message out into the cosmos. He crashes and traps himself. I think he's dead now. I'm not sure. He's kind of left a bit open-ended. So he says he throws the microphone to Peel, says, "Go out there, go." I don't know what this weird area, this boondoggle place. I don't know what the hell the name was. It makes about as much sense as what they actually call it in the movie. Let's be fair.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you've synopsised there because I just would have said I don't fucking know.
Yeah. So there's a kid on an alien planet and he's got a Pokeball.
So he runs off to the boondoggles, and out in space there is here we go. There's the most 1970s looking animated cast ever, which are magnificent. One of them is called Jaffa, which just made me think of Jaffa Cakes constantly.
Yeah.
I kept thinking of Jafar from Aladdin.
It's a nice combination of the two.
Yes.
There's an old pirate who looks like sort of Santa, and there is a princess and a prince who I don't think are related. It's not really explained, but they look identical. And these two weird sort of psychic things that you'd get as a free toy out of the cereal.
Yes.
And later on, there's a tiny bit at the end where the name comes from with a planet with Time Masters. No, hang on, I've missed a bit there. A planet with a being of pure consciousness, which turns people into faceless, genitalless angels. And that sets up a later bit. I mean, the thing you're not getting here, listeners, is I'm frowning as I'm just trying to plot this out. At the end, there's the Time Masters, who are sort of colonising the universe and send planets through time. I think I've got that all. I think.
Was that what they were doing?
I'm not sure.
Oh, thank God I'm not the only one who got baffled by this movie.
We should point out...
It'll do.
Yeah. We should point out that the version we watched was not optimal. As far as I can tell, the only way you can see this online at the moment is on a YouTube version, which is an English dub. And, animated dubs, I mean, sometimes Ghibli get a good one together because Ghibli are prestigious enough now that they can get the cast of your dreams to do one of these, but most of the time animated dubs are very bad.
I mean, there's one particular note which I loved. It's every now and again, there's like a musical interlude.
Yes.
And it couldn't have been more alien to what was actually happening on screen. There's like this old piratey guy who's got sort of a wizened voice. He's been around the block a few times. And then suddenly he sort of breaks out into this sort of 1970s ballad where he sounds about 50 years his junior. It's like so jarring.
He looks like Big Papa Smurf. And he's playing what I think is a banjolele, which if you were giving me the option of like choosing instruments to send into space as an example of human civilization, the banjolele would be quite low down the list, I think.
And it's the lyrics that are out of context, because it's also, he's singing about, I don't want to be, I think it's singing it to the kid stranded on the other planet, but I don't want to be Peter Pan, I don't want to be Superman, or something like that, and it's just like, okay.
Well, you're in luck, you're an old guy in space with a banjolele.
That's a real thing, a banjolele.
Oh yeah, it's a hybrid of a banjo and a ukulele developed by scientists who were trying to produce the most annoying musical instrument in the world.
Well, I've learnt something new today. And the other one's the same too. The woman who might... it's a very androgynous looking woman, let's be perfectly fair. She has a little ballad as well. And she falls in love with the kid, and I don't know what's happening in my life anymore.
One thing that I do love in this film is that when you see this sort of advanced spacefaring civilization who were trying to reach this kid, it is a very specifically kind of late 70s, early 80s French concept of advanced. So like Rob says, everyone is very androgynous. They're wearing kind of genderless clothes with mouth collars. One of them, I'm pretty sure, has a cigarette holder, which... perfect.
Yeah, on the horror channel recently, they're playing the most recent, the classic run of Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
And everyone in it has these fantastically shit long haircuts, and they all have the same chiseled jawline. You could put 10 people of these in a row, like in a sort of a police line out, and I couldn't be able to tell the difference between the 10. They're just 10 the same guys. And he's here too. And I love that. I love that shit 70s guy in this. Jaffa. He's Jaffa. Jaffa is the shit 70s guy.
Yeah. This is, I mean, we've talked about how dated it is. Do we think it's good dated or bad dated? Because there is an important difference, I think.
It's not as dated as some of the stuff from the 90s.
Yeah, in a weird way, that is true. Yeah.
I would agree on that, yeah.
80s and 90s have dated the hardest. I don't know why that is. I couldn't, make a case for why that might be, but yeah, I don't know, it's just, yeah, it's just okay, I think.
Yeah, because even if you look at how it's drawn as well, there's a certain charm to it as well, even if it isn't, particularly not, Disney levels of technical ability or anything like that. There's still, a certain quality to it that really does work for my money, even if I couldn't comprehend what was going on in the slightest.
Yes.
Oh, one thing we have sort of overlooked as far as not knowing what's going on, I think it was based on, I always forget this guy's name. He used to work with Heavy Metal magazine.
Morbius, yeah, I was just going to mention Morbius, yeah.
Who, I don't know much of his stuff, but I know he has this sort of, psychedelic space sci-fi.
Yeah.
Thing, yeah.
And he works a lot with Alejandro Jodorowsky, so, that tells you something.
And that explains a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. It kind of fits in with his sort of worldview as well. Having seen a worldview in a sense of, I've seen Jodorowsky films and I think I'm having a nervous breakdown, and this, it scratches that same itch, this one.
The thing that I think is interesting about Morbius is that obviously you can see elements of his design world in a lot of Hollywood science fiction. Ridley Scott was a huge Morbius fan when he started out doing things like Alien, Blade Runner. But when you see it in its actual cultural context, when you see it in something French, it is still powerfully weird. Time has not watered down how odd it looks.
No. I mean, it could be worse. Some 80s animation has reflected the sort of values and standards of the time. I can't remember the name of the guy. He did with Fritz the Cat, Cool World.
Oh, yeah.
Ralph Bakshi.
Yeah.
Bakshi, yeah.
Is it Bakshi? I think you might be right
it's Bakshi.
Because I was thinking of the guy who did Land Before Time, and they're a horrible confusion to make. I don't think Ralph Bakshi should ever do children's animation. I think he'll scar the world if he did that.
Remind me never to let you plan a kid's birthday party, Rob.
Welcome to the PG version of Fritz the Cat, everyone.
Rob, remember, there's a Pixar film called Up and there's a Russ Meyer film called Up. Never ever get them confused.
Just for clarity's sake, I was thinking of Don Bluth, so sorry.
That's the fella.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certain Ralph Bakshi movies which are horrible in their values. And And I think the thing which really stands out for this and the other Leloup movie is the kind of, well, I say this, it's kind of like Czech New Wave, isn't it? When you don't have the context, you think none of it's political, but once you do have the context, every single last thing is political. So I can say that René Leloup movies are, like, there's nothing political going on here, nothing to see here, but maybe there is. It's kind of quite ambiguous with that, I think.
I think there is a kind of innocence, certainly to Time Masters. It doesn't, if it is making a statement, and like you, I'm sure it may well be in there if I knew enough of the context, but it doesn't feel like anyone doing anything other than sort of spinning a fantasy to amuse themselves.
Yeah, nothing gratuitous. I mean, even when the brief parts of, like, say, nudity happens on screen, it's played as naturally as can be, really, so you don't get the sense that it's, like, playing it up for shock value or anything like that.
Well, there is no real shock value. At least the Time Masters, I don't think there's anything which would offend or upset anybody. It's quite, despite it being nuts, it is quite accessible.
Some people get very shaken up when they watch something they can't understand, though.
Well, yeah, but that's funny, so...
Yeah, fair point.
I mean, if you're not telling me trying to explain my way through the Jodorowsky films on our previous podcast wasn't funny, I don't know what I was doing on that podcast.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I think I had a few problems with it, but I don't know how many of them are down to the dub. I mean, one of the weird things about this is, for all we've said, it is a very French film in a lot of ways. Everyone in the English dub is so English.
Not only that, I found the dub stagnant in a way that is just didn't feel natural to me, like how people would stop and start, like, their lines.
Yes.
I found that a really odd rhythm to get into, in particular.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, you've got lines like, I mean, I wrote one of them down because it's just extraordinary. You must excuse my chum. He says everything that pops into his head. You think, okay, well, I wasn't expecting, like, Ken Loach levels of naturalistic dialogue from the setup. But, yeah, you're hobbling yourself here, I think.
There's one bit to... Yeah, sorry.
I don't know if I'm going to refer to the same bit that Aidan was just there, but there's a certain bit, you know, like, what was it, Batman, the 1960s one, where Robin says, "Holy whatever, Batman."
Yes.
Yeah.
There's one of that, and it's like, "Holy Stardust." It's like, is that supposed to be sort of an exclamation in this universe? That's kind of really weird and jarring.
Yeah, that's not great. So I will suspend a bit of judgment about it because I don't know how many of these are problems of the dub.
Yeah, there's one bit towards the end where the kid gets, I don't know, it gets confronted by a group of killer giant mosquitoes or something like that towards the very end.
Does, yeah.
And then he just says to them, "Oi, go away, leave me alone." and when he says that, it's just like, wait, hang on. You shouldn't be saying that when you're confronted by a group of giant killer hornets or something like that. You'd be scarfing out of there.
There's like an army of them, and doesn't he say, "You're ugly, you're ugly"?
Yes, that's it. Which is, I mean, I'm not into body-shaming alien mosquitoes. Can't we just live and let live?
Yeah, but that's the thing. So, like, you talked about the aliens, because there's a few in this, and I don't really know how to describe them, really. They kind of feel like they might be in the Yellow Submarine, sort of as the Blue Meanie sort of thing. Yeah. Like this very... It's got a lot of junk in the trunk and the bottom half, let's just say.
Yes.
It's got 4 legs like an elephant, but on the top half, it's very thin, and it's got, like, dog ears and a weird nose. It's like, what is this? I'm not sure what I'm seeing, you know. It's original creations throughout it, you know. I mean, even the Jungle Witch Peel, which I always kept on thinking of John Peel. It's a story about kid John Peel off
See, I was expecting him to run into Key at some point, but yeah.
But yeah, the design, I think that's a lot of the Mobius influence, I think.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that Mobius had in his comics work, which again was hugely influential on Ridley Scott, is that it was kind of a workaday future. You know, it's a future full of incredible visual marvels, but the people in it often treat it like just another job. And you get that a bit with Peel, don't you? It's like, he's quite a believable kid for this kind of fantasy movie. He's really pissed off to be stuck on this planet.
Yeah, and especially being told to obviously just stay in the forest. Because if he wanders too far out the forest, that's when he just... disastrous things will happen, let's just say that. And then... So, yeah, it's just... So he has a reason, obviously, to be so angry and peed off with, say, someone like Jafar or... I can't remember what he's called. Santa Claus or something.
It's
It'll
proper
do.
Smurf. Yeah. But he's like believably annoyed in a very childish way, and he'll do things like just walk up to a big alien tree and kick it. And I thought that was quite cute. That was a little note of realism in a very unrealistic film.
I think the question that you've always got to answer with stuff like this is, do we like it?
With strong reservations. And I think, like I say, I don't know how many of those reservations are down to the stiffness of the English dub. I think there is maybe a problem in having a film like this led by a character who is just bored of all these wonders, but they are pretty wonderful, so it kind of gets over it.
I mean, especially when you look at, like, the design of it, as Graham was saying before. So, say, for example, even like the Faceless Angels, for example, where you can just see how imposing of a threat they can be just by pure design alone. I think that says a lot, even by identity, even if, we can't really get a firm grasp of what this film is trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I approve of it in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I think it's too short.
Yeah.
And too long at the same time.
It's too short to properly explore some of the concepts like the Time Masters, but also too long to be just a sort of zippy kids adventure. It's odd like that. I get what you're saying.
Like the core of it, which I assume is about retrieving Peel and bringing him back to the spaceship, that goes on seemingly forever. There's an escape attempt to the planet with these stone angels things. Doctor Who stole that, clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they can also control time. What the hell? How did I not realise this?
And that middle bit is just over in like a blink of an eye. It's just so quick. And the end bit, where they introduce this sort of SS space military.
Yeah.
Which, like, who are these people? They seem interesting in sort of what the universe is putting together. Oh, they're gone now. Doesn't matter.
And then just when you think it's building up to something, it just ends. I'm just like, wait, hang on, what?
Is that supposed to be a significant ending? Am I supposed to have... I don't know. Okay, moving on, I guess.
Yeah, it's an odd stew.
Intriguing, though.
So, did everyone watch this one first? Did you, Rob?
The second. So,
right. I was going to ask if it whetted your appetite, but yeah, I guess we'll get onto that.
Here, I brought you this.
Thanks, but no.
That's okay. I have another secret weapon.
Sorry, but no.
I told you, Horka!
Who called these guys again? What a bunch of weirdos.
We figured it couldn't hurt.
Don't worry about it, kids. I don't think it's working.
We can do this. We're almost there. Do you need some water, Hina?
How about some candy?
Just tell him to go home.
Okay.
The sky!
next week on the show, it's Makoto Shinkai, I believe. And then there's a new episode which we'll announce closer to the time. No spoilers. But if you've enjoyed the show so far, please do consider subscribing wherever you get your podcasts from, whether that is Apple Podcasts. And if you do listen on Apple Podcasts, please do take a few moments to give us a rating and review. And if you do, take a screenshot and tag me on social media so I can give it a look-see and maybe read it out on the show. I'd like to do that. You can get me on Twitter at _RJSimpson and on Instagram at Directors Uncut Pod. Or if you want to email me, whether it's your review that you did on social, or one of the platforms, or whether you have something to say about one of the many directors and the movies that we've covered, whether it's this week with René Leloup or one of the episodes before this. It's entirely your decision. We will read out any comments here, but you can email those to directorsuncutpod@gmail.com. But yeah, I think that's about it for the mid-roll. We've got Makoto Shinkai coming up next week. Yeah, that's it. Let's not dilly-dally any further. We'll jump into the second half of this retro Patreon recording, where we look at the main feature of the episode.
L'Europe says the film cast a spell on us from the first image to the last. Le Monde, humor, fantasy, poetry. An exciting film.
Can't really segue out of that because I don't think there's an efficient way to do that rather than, having this horrible pun or just speaking without saying anything like I'm doing now. So let's move on to his biggest claim to fame, a movie which for many is probably one of the, I hate using terms like this, but it is how it's described by many. It's described as one of the greatest animated films of all time by certain people. And that is 1973's Fantastic Planet.
Yeah, Fantastic Planet, which, like you say, is his most famous film. It's a film that Aidan and I had seen before. What was your familiarity with it, Rob?
Yeah, I've seen it before, a few years back now. I can't remember the justification. I think I was just on one of those 30-day challenges, maybe, or 100, 52 weekly challenges on Letterboxd. It's one of those films where it feels like if you take movies as a bit of an adventure and finding new stuff out, it's one of those ones that you kind of have to tick off the list.
For me, I remember seeing the DVD of it advertised. I think it was out on Eureka Masters of Cinema very, very early in their run. And although I never saw it until it came on Mubi, I think earlier this year, it did lodge in my head. It had that image of the giant blue alien with the tiny human in its hand, and it really stuck in my head.
It's very striking. Yeah, I completely agree as well, especially for animation, which is all you ever wanted it to be honest.
Yeah.
Now here's the killer question. Who's going to synopsize this one? Because as hard as Time Masters is, I think this one's even harder.
What do you think? Because Time Masters has loads of moving parts, and it has the Time Masters themselves come in at the end, and I don't know what they're doing. Whereas there is a part of Fantastic Planet that is very dense and myth-heavy, but there is also an element of Fantastic Planet where, there are some humans, and they're on a planet with a load of big blue aliens, and the big blue aliens treat the humans as pets or vermin, depending on, which alien it is. And the humans understandably do not like this, and they at first rebel and then come to an understanding with your big blue people. There's a lot more to it than that, but I think that's basically what happens.
Just for a bit of context, I think the humans are called Oms, and the big blue aliens that Graham was describing before, they're called Drags or Trags?
Drags, yeah.
Yeah,
it's basically insert mad sci-fi lingo in here.
Yes.
And that's what that is, Omen and Draug. That's mad sci-fi lingo.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something, isn't it, really? Because it's kind of almost positioned as a documentary, the way there's a narrator sort of overscoring things and explaining the massive amounts of exposition that needs to be laid out for this thing.
Yeah, I also think there's something about that narration that is very necessary, because when it comes in, it's straight after the opening sequence, which is like second only to Watership Down as one of the most harrowing things in animation history, as a human mother is taunted and eventually killed by some drag kids. and only her baby survives, and the narration comes in a way that makes it clear that the narrator is that baby, and at that point you are just so grateful for the reassurance that the kid doesn't die.
Yeah, it's oddly depressing in a way, this film. So I think that narrative framework that Rob was mentioning earlier, I think that helps cement it a lot more in understanding what it is. Because whereas something like Time Masters, because it just drops you in the blue completely, that you just have to swim by yourself and try to make heads and tails out of it. Whereas there's someone that there's a device that's actually like guiding you through it, at least.
Yeah. I mean, if you take that away, this might be one of the most incomprehensible movies ever made.
Yes. Yeah.
So at least it's giving you that hook to sort of hang on to, some sort of like point of reference.
There is very little dialogue, and the design is, if anything, even weirder than Time Masters, I thought.
Yeah, cross between like Terry Gilliam era Monty Python animation and LSD.
Yeah, it's just one of the... I mean, my favourite moments of this is when nothing's happening, when it's just sort of like meandering aimlessly through the countryside, I guess.
Through a sort of landscape that looks like what would happen if 1970s science fiction paperbacks had cover art by Hieronymus Bosch.
Very well explained. But yeah, it's just these animals. It's just, you think, oh, there's a weird shape. Oh, no, it's an animal. Oh, no, it's eating another animal. Oh, no, it's a bigger animal with a sad face in a cage. What's happening?
Oh, no,
I love it.
the big animal's thrown the bat-like animal onto the floor and it dies. Oh no.
Yes. Its narrative is a kind of an ecological one. It's, I suppose, part of the hook of it is it's about an environment where humans aren't the apex species.
No, it's kind of broken in two, sort of structurally. The first half has names. Well, the big blue dudes and the humans. And sort of a weird symbiotic relationship. There's one in particular human which it takes centres around, and it uses that as a device to sort of explain the world. And the weird stuff that the big blue giants get up to is sort of like taking LSD and sort of merging farms or whatever that is. Learning things through audio cassettes, but have pictures in their brains. It's kind of a bit wacky in that first half. I
sometimes think that, it can be a bit lazy to talk about drugs when you see a surrealist movie, but there's literally one scene in this where the drags go to imbibe the smoke of the bong of wisdom, essentially. And you think, you can't really look at this any other way, can you?
Yeah, it's one of those cheap things, isn't it? How people say, oh, it's Lynch-esque, as sort of, I don't know how to explain this. No, it's not. It's nothing like that. But, yeah, LSD movie making, this is legit one of the few where it's actually apt.
Yeah.
I'd say. But in the second half, it turns into a war movie. Effectively. Complete with weird hoovers of death.
Do you know what the second half reminded me of? What I thought that particular twist in the narrative made me think about?
Go on.
No.
It made me think of The Lobster. Like when the rebel humans turn up who've resisted being turned into pets by the drags. I just thought, oh wow, it's like Leia Seydoux and her tribe of militant single people in The Lobster.
I mean, even before it all kicks off, they have like a weird little system going on where they have like fights to the death, where they've got the arms tied behind the back and this big sort of snapping monster thing on the stomach. It's sort of like a fight club. I mean, even this is one of these things where I don't love to say in the script for it, because how?
One of the things that I'd failed to appreciate the first time is this is adapted from a novel, and I'm just agog at what the novel must have been like. Written by a guy who was a dentist in his main career, so he'll have had access to, gas.
I would explain it that.
Someone's opened the canister of laughing gas again.
There's a few interesting people in this, so there's no one, I think, that makes everything click into place as much as knowing that Mobius does the design for Time Masters, where as soon as you learn that, you just think, oh, right, that's why it looks the way it is. But it is interesting that this has a script by Roland Topor, a French cartoonist who also collaborated with, I think he wrote the original novel that Roman Polanski's The Tenant is based on, and he also had an acting role as Renfield in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, so he pops up in some pretty interesting places.
European art of this era is just so bloody weird, the things that people get up to.
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's done in, I know Aidan mentioned Terry Gilliam earlier, but there's an element where that's not just a stylistic resemblance, that rather than animated in a traditional cell style, they actually created these beautiful sort of pencil drawings and substituted them. They would have a drawing of, say, an Orm's head straight on, an Orm's head to the side slightly, an Orm's head talking, and they would just paste them on. So it creates this weird kind of shifting look to it that I think is really effective.
Yeah, it definitely establishes like its own identity pretty early on, even with like say for the backgrounds in this are just still, well, I'm kind of underselling this. They are still painted still images basically. And then you get like the one like character in the foreground, like as Graham was saying before, and that movement as well. So it creates this kind of weird, kind of harrowing in a way ambience to it that honestly does make it its own thing.
It's got a kind of creepy storybook air to it, isn't it? Which makes the kind of spareness and the allegorical quality of the narrative work, but it just has this element that you are looking in a very, very weird children's picture book.
Yeah, it's genuinely alien as well. I mean, you can't say that about a lot of things. There's no sort of points of reference to anything of this. The only thing that sort of looks like anything that you'd have seen before or have any sort of ties to the humans in it. Everything else is just completely off the page, off the piste, left of centre. You know, it's and there's kind of something rewarding in that. I mean, I've said it many times on many podcasts that one thing that I really like finding are movies where you think, well, I've never seen anything like that, both in terms of how the plot shakes out and what it looks like. And I think this is one of sort of the primo examples, really, because I don't think there's anything out there in the medium of cinema which is even vaguely like this.
No, I would agree. And, you know, the proof of that is in the fact that Leloup had to basically invent the French animation industry in order to get this off the ground. You know, there'd been French animated shorts before, but nobody had produced a feature at this level. He had to outsource a lot of it to Czechoslovakia.
That explains a lot, because it does have that weird sort of subversive edge that Czech stuff does.
Definitely, yeah.
It's kind of an intangible quality, but you just sort of feel that connection.
You know it when you see it. Yeah. Well, I think it's the sort of film where two people can like it, but also like it on completely different levels. There isn't like one prescriptive way in which you can enjoy this film. And I found it really sad the first time, and I found it almost devastatingly sad the second time. But I know some people just think it's like a really wonderful, imaginative fantasy, and, you know, fair play to them. That's a completely valid way to enjoy it as well.
Sad though. I kind of get lost in the phantasmagoria.
That is the thing, and I think that's very possible, but what always impresses me about it is that I do really feel for the humans in it, and I think when your premise is this weird, it's really quite an achievement to get emotion out of it.
Yeah. As Graham was saying before, that opening sequence, I think it just sets it right from the starting line, basically.
Yeah.
And bringing up the comparison point of... balls, I got the name now. Watership Down.
Yes.
Quite apt, because it's not the sort of story where it's for kids, it's for adults. You know, it's kind of up in the air. It's got nudity, but as Aidan said, it's more sort of matter of fact rather than sexualised in any way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But back to Watership Down, it has that sort of harsh reality to it.
Yeah.
It's not sugarcoating a single thing. I mean, you could sort of take the moral away from it, like, as a kid, basically, that the world is a horrible place and, you know, you got to fight for your right to party or be destroyed by giant Tories. I mean, they are blue, so...
Yeah, it fits.
But yeah, it's kind of one of those hard truth movies, which I think there's not enough of it in the kids' space. I know this is not a kids' movie, but a kid could watch it and take something from it.
Yeah, I think that's part of what's interesting about it. It's that it's not intended primarily for children, but most Western animation that is not for children spends a very long time trumpeting the fact that it's for adults, and this doesn't do that either.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff like that says, "Look, boobs, look, gar, look,
yeah,
there's a willy." But this, this isn't anything like that. You know, I think the sort of 80s in America have a lot to answer for in that regard. But
yeah, maybe, yeah, the sort of heavy metal and stuff like that. Yeah.
But I think we kind of answered it. I mean, general feelings on the thing.
Yeah, I found it fascinating the first time I watched it. I found it even more entrancing the second time. And I think before we end, we really do have to mention Alan Garaga's score, which is astounding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's typical sci-fi, but not. And it's what's the name of that instrument? I keep on forgetting what it's called.
Sort of mellotron kind of thing.
Yeah. Sort of the same thing they used to make the Star Trek theme tune. I can't remember the name of the specific.
Oh, that's the Ondes Martnot, as any Radiohead fan will be able to tell you.
He didn't hesitate at all there.
Johnny Greenwood loves an Ondes Martnot. That's how I know about it.
But yeah, I mean, it plays in with a sort of alien aura of it, that the music is kind of like this. The way I was thinking of this movie, it's basically like a King Crimson album gained sentience.
Yes.
And the music kind of has that vibe too.
Yeah, but it's not it doesn't have that kind of pompous air that a lot of English prog does. It's very light, jazzy, kind of slightly funky prog, which I think is much more appealing. And it's been sampled in a lot of hip-hop records. When I reviewed this on Letterboxd, I had a big, long chain in my replies of people posting stuff by Big Pun, by Madlib, by Flying Lotus, just loads of hip-hop that samples the Fantastic Planet score.
Really?
Aiden. Yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to dig into that maybe. Have a look at that list. What did you think of it, Aiden?
No, I completely agree. I really liked it as well. I think on a second viewing, because I assume we all watched this. I mean, I saw the original French language version.
So did I, yeah.
Yeah, which is on Mubi as well. And I think that helps me understand it a bit more, because I'm not having to listen to a stiff English dub at the same time. And I know that sounds a bit harsh in terms of the animation size, because obviously sometimes this is done for selling it to a particular audience. But I think with this, it just works a lot more, especially from understanding from a perspective point of view. But no, I completely agree. I really liked it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an English dub out there. There's certainly clips in English on YouTube which should be making use out of, but yeah, I think it's best served by being French, really. It keeps it sort of authenticity in check.
It kind of unifies the sort of feel of the movie, where it helps if I'm listening to the humans in a language I don't speak, and I'm listening to the drags in a language I don't speak, rather than having this slightly distracting thing where you've got two totally alien species talking to each other in English voices. That just helped for me.
It's also the authenticity to the original, the originality of the vision. And when it comes to dubs, there's a part of it in which they translate the script, and if something doesn't work, they'll cut it or completely change what that was to fit their requirements.
Yeah.
Which results in a lot of English dubs having things which don't make sense as far as what the original vision were. Or it's just sort of the creators out for their own sort of fulfillment.
Yeah.
So keeping it original in the original language is exactly as it was intended. There's no sort of weird things, which is what I was kind of worrying with Time Masters, that a lot of that doesn't make sense because they were kind of banging it into shape from a French dub, which doesn't really translate.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how that would be a problem with something like Time Masters, although with Fantastic Planet, maybe I will watch the English dub, because how can it possibly make less sense?
So, the last question, René Lelou. What are our feelings on him?
I find him kind of fascinating, although I don't know if he'll turn out to be one of those one-and-done directors for me. You know, like we said, he's done 3 films. Time Masters, I think, is diverting, but Fantastic Planet is great, and I don't know whether it will just be the case that you need to see Fantastic Planet and the rest you can take or leave, but he is certainly very original.
I completely agree. Even with something, I think the third and final film that he did before he bowed out from the animation industry was Gandahar, or features at least. And I'm still intrigued to see Gandahar because it's one of those, even by design standards, it just follows in a similar pattern that the Uplift 2 films established as well. So it follows suit at least, and it definitely intrigues my taste as well.
I think that's part of the appeal of animation as an art form, isn't it? That when you talk about a director's signature style with like live action cinema, you can be talking about things like shot composition or camera placement or other things that most people don't really think about when they're watching films. Whereas with animation, no, it's just literally what do they draw like? What do their images look like? And there's a kind of purity to that I like.
I mean, the thing that I like about him is he's a true animator. It's like true animation. I mean, that sounds an awfully pompous thing to say, but a lot of animators basically create things in animation because budget makes it almost impossible to do it otherwise. But it could be achieved, it's just there's not enough money in the world.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's so other, it's so alien, it's so one of a kind, that the only medium any of his work, any of his imagination could be contained by is the animated form. And I enjoy that when a director actually makes the case for this is why I animate rather than, well, I can't afford anything else, so it may as well be animation.
You behold your brother's gaze in amazement. I knew well you would. Pity you never paid a bastard's eyes heed before. Now, behold how swiftly your brother swings his sword. Strike, brother, strike. But know that bearing a stolen ring makes no half-breed a king. Soaked in my blood, 'twill soon be sliding off your arm like a serpent. Your kingdom will not last. Let this misdeed haunt your living nights, till a flaming vengeance scorches on your dead. Strike. Strike!
Which brings us to the back half of the show. At the front, we did René Lelou, and for this section where we talk about things that we've been watching, I have been joined by Vincent from Invasion of the Poddy People.
Hello there, Rob.
And Kat from the Hollywood News.
Hiya.
How are you both? Both good?
Yeah, doing well.
It's quiet, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Easter holidays are over, so the toddler is back at preschool, and she's going for an extra day a week now. So I am all good.
Small victories.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. The holidays are over, and I'm back to answering student emails and getting ready for when their assessments come in and all the marking.
Yes, it'd be around sort of dissertation start at the time of the year now, isn't it?
Oh yes, they come in a few weeks as well.
That was a fun time of year at university. Anyhow, who wants to jump in first with what they have been watching?
Well, like I say, it's been the Easter holidays, and I sort of took full advantage of there being a second parent around for at least some of that time. And I think I went to the cinema 6 times in the 14 days, which is the most I've done since before she was born. So that was really nice. Bit of a mixed bag. So just going through them quickly, it's all The Bad Guys, Morbius, Sonic 2, The Northman, The Lost City, and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
That's out, is it? I had no idea.
It was an unlimited screening, so it's released on the 22nd. But I think they did them all. They did an Odeon, a Picture House, a Cineworld. They obviously want as many eyes on this thing before it releases, because I think it's one of those that sort of needs the word of mouth, because the trailer doesn't really do the film justice. I don't think this trailer is like, it's Nick Cage as Nick with a K, Cage.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's a bit of a spy caper, but also there's this really nice story of friendship. It's Nick Cage he's in need of money, so he accepts some money to go to Spain and attend a superfans party played by Pedro Pascal. And initially it's a bit weird, but then they form a friendship with one another, which I think as we get older, it's harder to form those connections to other adults. And I think that's particularly true with men. So it's quite nice to sort of see these two male characters sort of bond with one another over this shared love of films, not just Nick's films, but other films. But then waiting in the background is this CIA spy double identity sort of subplot that's there threatening to rip them apart. But if you're a fan of Nick Cage, it's a great film because it covers everything Cage. He goes full Cage. It's like Cage on Cage on Cage, just for maximum enjoyment.
Uncaged.
Yes, exactly.
Quite. He's a complicated man to be a fan of, though, really, isn't he? Because he does kind of go unleashed, as it were. But sometimes he can be capable of some great roles in great movies, so you never know what you're really going to get with him.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think he's got like 110 film credits.
Wow. Yeah.
And some of them are, fantastic, but he's been quite open and honest in interviews, and he's, admitted that a lot of films that he's made in the last 10, 15 years have been to pay debts. His family had debts, he had debts. But he always, I think the good thing about Nick Cage is, even if he's in a terrible film, he does give it his all. I think there was this one called Jiu-Jitsu where I think he turned up for like 3 days, and I think they basically said, do what you want, Nick, because he seemed to be in a completely different film to everybody else. And that's a film I wanted to be watching and not the film that was actually playing out. But yeah, Unbearable Weight is definitely one for the Cage fans, but with enough to it to mean that if you have a friend that doesn't know him or doesn't like him, they can still come and have a nice time. It doesn't exclude people too much.
It's a rare thing for actors to have that sort of a career where you can have the introspective movie looking back at your career. I remember Bruce Campbell did one. I think it was called My Name is Bruce.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that one?
There was also Jean-Claude Van Damme did JCVD.
Yes.
Yeah. So you said The Northman. That one pricked my ears. How was that?
Yeah. I'm a massive fan of The Witch, so I was very much looking forward to it. Wasn't so keen on The Lighthouse, but I think that's because the cinema that I watched it in had terrible luminance on the screen. And if the bulb isn't bright, I'm going to have a nap during your film, which is exactly what happened in The Lighthouse. I just got nice and cozy and had a little nap. And I haven't been able to sort of work up the energy to sit down with it at home and watch it again. But The Northman was completely different. Eggers has spent his money well to create this very violent, lyrical Viking savage tale, which is it's a lot. Like the first half an hour, 40 minutes, the sound design and the score just take you into this time and this world. Almost to an uncomfortable point. You sort of with the clans as they're working themselves up to go to battle each other, and it just kind of felt like it must have been a lot of fun for the actors because they're like howling like wolves and growling like bears and that. And I just think it must have just took them all back to their drama school days where it's like, well, we're going to be trees today, and now we're going to be, you're going to be a monster. But I think I'm a big Lion King fan. And they're both based on the same with Hamlet. They're all based on the same myth or story. And it was kind of strange sort of watching it and seeing the parallels with something like The Lion King and trying to work out who the Rafiki was and who the Timon was or whatever. But then I came home, and it was either that day or the next day The Lion King was actually on TV. And once you've seen the climax of The Northman, you will not watch the end of The Lion King in the same way again. It was a bit weird. It was a bit weird watching Simba and Scar go at it at the top of the mountain after seeing The Northman. But I'm hoping that, I think it's about to release in America this weekend, and I'm hoping that brings some pennies in, because it's well worth the time.
Have you seen that one, Vincent?
Indeed, I have. Yes, I just saw it the other day. I was similarly impressed, and I agree with everything Kat said about it. It is a very immersive experience. It's ferocious, it's intense, and it's brutal. It is like Hamlet, a proper revenge tragedy. The visuals are very stark. There were parts of it that very much reminded me of The Lighthouse, because there's a lot of direct to camera address, with shots rather than being over somebody's shoulder, it's straight in their face, which I thought was great. And Alexander Skarsgård has always been pretty buff, but he appears to have now borrowed shoulders from Dwayne Johnson, because my God, that man is buff. And it does, and something I especially liked about The Northman, it did this lovely job of keeping it ambiguous as to, hang on, is something supernatural happening, or is that sort of imagination? Is somebody just on a trip? Because, characters take mushrooms at some points. So I felt it did a really nice job of giving us that balance, that the ambiguity between fantasy and reality, which is fitting, I think, because it is it's a mythic story, and it talks about destiny, and it talks about choice, and then it has a couple of surprises, I must say. But it is very much creating a very immersive world, much like The Witch did, much like The Lighthouse did, but on a much grander scale. I remember thinking right from the start, oh, okay, this is not a film that's going to hold your hand. And it really doesn't. It's like, right, here we go, and we're off.
It's curious that it follows it's released the year after The Green Knight, though.
That's a really good point. Yeah, those would make for a hell of a double bill. It does have a similar, I think, kind of tone to The Grim Knight. To The Grim Knight? Because it's very grim. To The Green Knight. It's crashing, I think. Kat, you mentioned the sound design, and I think that's a good point, because it is a film that just kind of crashes against your consciousness, battering at you the way, well, Viking raiders would batter against a barrier. So, yeah, I was thoroughly impressed with The Northman. I remember it was interesting because I saw it with a couple of friends who were not quite prepared for what it would be. They thought it would be kind of like Gladiator, which is a fair comparison, but it's nastier than Gladiator. It's
the last Kingdom's out right now, so
quite. Yeah,
it's
more
expecting
brutal
more of that, but maybe not.
But yeah, certainly highly recommended. And it fitted, if I may speak of what else I've seen lately.
Sure.
Yeah, I've had my last 3 cinema trips have all been historical setting, but they've been very different. The Northman was the most recent. Last week, I saw Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, which also has a historical setting, being set in the late 1920s, which actually is especially interesting because we get to see a wizarding world, but we've also got politicking and protests going on in Berlin. So Germany, Berlin, late 1920s. There's political strife, and there's this charismatic new candidate rising. Yes, these parallels are fairly clear, which is not a criticism. I think it does a really nice job of putting, drawing a parallel with this fantastical scenario and an actual historical scenario. I think as a film overall, The Secrets of Dumbledore, it's a step up from The Crimes of Grindelwald, which I found very frustrating. It's a lovingly designed film. The narrative is sometimes a bit meandering, but it works as a magical conspiracy thriller from the perspective of the conspirators, which I thought was quite nice. I always enjoy stories of politicking. It's not quite Wizarding World does Game of Thrones, but maybe there's an element there. And it has some nice themes of acceptance and intolerance, true hearts,
which
find goodness.
Quite telling, really, themes of tolerance, because Harry Potter's become a bit of a poison chalice, hasn't it? Not because of the actual material itself. It's all on the troublesome creator, isn't it?
This is true, and there's always the tricky thing about how do we separate the art from the artist? And in some respects, I think in the case of something like this, it's harder to do that because J.K. Rowling is so bound up with the franchise. On the other hand, it's also worth remembering, but there's a lot of other people involved here, and is it fair to tar all of them with the same brush?
All of their hard work undone by what she says on Twitter. I think it's very unfair. Yeah.
And prior to that, the day before seeing The Secrets of Dumbledore, I saw Benedetta, which is the new film by Paul Verhoeven. Now, this movie was one that I started off with a go like, okay, I think I'm going along with this. This is fine. And then it goes into the stages of, okay, what? That's interesting. And by the end of it, I was like, that was a fucking masterpiece. That was actually...
He's in his 80s now, isn't he?
Sorry?
I think. Is Verhoeven in his 80s, knocking on his 80s? Because he's become fearless. Like that, He's fearless in his 80s or 70s, whatever age he is.
Indeed, yeah. Born 1938, so he is no spring chicken.
He just seems to be absolutely fearless in the topics that he's doing. Like Elle before it was a movie about rape. He's not, sugarcoating it at all.
Yeah. Well, put it this way. I mean, Benedetta, I felt felt like a cross between Ken Russell's The Devils and Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden.
Sold.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. It's lustrous, it's gorgeous, it's electrifying, it deals with themes of belief and fanaticism. It's got politics and passion, there's love, and there's this fantastic tension throughout it between faith and duplicity. And weirdly, like The Northman, it has a similar kind of ambiguity as to, okay, what is happening? Is it this thing or the other thing? And genuinely, I think, keeps you guessing. And I'll tell you what, prior to seeing Benedetta, I didn't know that I needed to see a film in which a pair of 17th century nuns pleasure each other with a dildo carved out of a wooden carving of the Virgin Mary.
Oh, he's really going for it, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, those were my recent 3 cinema excursions. Benedetta, Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore, and The Northman. All historical settings, all very different.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Because the term period movies or historical movies, it used to be, a bit more reserved, a bit more Sunday afternoon tea time. I don't know what changed that. Maybe it was Yorgos Lanthimos with The Favourite. Maybe it was before that. I don't know, but it completely changed tack.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, that's a slightly wider question, but what would you say is the difference between historical drama and costume drama?
That's a good question. I said Bridgerton is a costume drama, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Historical, I don't know, that kind of says to me maybe Gladiator, maybe something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe historical drama sounds like it could be, anything with a historical setting, whereas costume drama, feels like it's more specifically kind of, that's sort of like 17th, 18th, 19th century, generally going to be set in Britain or some other part of Europe. Its costume is more specific. If we're talking about TV, I did also recently watch the 2nd season of Bridgerton, which it does exactly what you described. It overturns the potentially stodgy and overly prim Georgian-era courting drama into something that's witty and vibrant and has some genuine social and emotional stakes. And I'm sure any Jane Austen fan listening to this is going to say, that's exactly what Jane Austen has been doing has always done. Why are you ignoring Jane Austen? And I will give my answer. I have always found the novels of Jane Austen really boring. So
I mean, I shouldn't be dismissive of them either. I remember the adaptation that Kerry Fukunaga did of Jane Eyre a decade ago now. I really loved that, but I think that's because it basically treated the material like it was a ghost story rather than tea time at, I don't know, I'm going to embarrass myself by using a metaphor that doesn't work, but you know what I mean.
Well, Jane Eyre is a gothic tale. I mean, it is about, among other things, a house that is kind of haunted. So that's an entirely fitting way of dealing with it.
Okay, so I've got two, neither of which are new releases, but, well, it just is what it is. The first one I watched last night, it is Come True, 2020. I think it's the third or fourth feature from the director. Just getting the guy's name up now. Anthony Scott Burns. Yes. This is an interesting movie because it's divided opinion. Oh boy, is it divided opinion. But on the face of it, it's about how an 18-year-old young woman's, she's got problems with sleep. So she goes to the sleep study. Maybe she can conquer it. Maybe they'll find out what is bothering her so much. That's not really the intent of this sleep study, because what they're doing is they've invented this amazing piece of analog technology which effectively records what's happening on dreams and projects it onto this TV screens through this weird sort of, I don't know what you call it, it sort of monitors brainwaves. It's like a little hat that they put on them while they sleep. And what it evolves into fundamentally is a horror movie about sleep paralysis demons, which is underutilized as a horror monster, I must say.
Yeah, because what could be more terrifying?
And just it talks about sort of how it goes back in history and how we've always been sort of conditioned to be frightened of this dark figure with white eyes. And I'll be honest, I loved it, and there's things I love about it. Absolutely love about it. The music is wonderful.
Music's amazing.
It has that sort of drive wooziness about it, which is just like Bards of Canada, the movie, if that means anything to either of you. I don't know. And the aesthetic as well. It has this, it follows out of history, out of time. It's sort of closest to the 80s, I guess, but still it doesn't really feel like it belongs anywhere. That I loved. And the idea that it doesn't go for jump scares. Again, absolutely love that. Any horror movie which doesn't feel the need to punctuate its scares by having this big spike in the score, instant win for me.
Yeah.
However, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think I know what you're about to say. You're about to say talk about the ending, so I'll let you get to that, and then I'll jump in.
Well, there's two bits. I think the romance is unnecessary, but it doesn't. Some people have been really, really visceral in their dislike about that. I mean, it could be better without it, but it doesn't ruin the film by any means. But the ending, I don't know how to talk about this without actually talking about this. How can I put this? Effectively has this scene in the woods, great scene in the woods, where lead characters sleptwalk into the middle of nowhere, and it has like a cut to black, a great cut to black, and then it fades back again and gives you the real ending. And that, I think, has annoyed a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to talk around it as best I can, but...
I guess it's sort of like one of those cliched endings that, when somebody runs out of steam, it's like, oh, well, it was all this, and sort of neatly doesn't tidy it up. And I think that's what's annoyed people. But I think there are several different readings to what that ending means and what it stands for within the piece. So yeah, me and my husband watched it together, and he loved it and then hated the ending, and I just loved it in spite of the ending. So
I think I should be a bit more forgiving on it, because the same thing happened a few years back with Ghost Stories as well.
Yes,
which I was completely in for, but
yeah. So it's interesting. So it sounds like you're saying what I was talking about with Benedetta and the Northman, the ambiguity. You're saying that Come True doesn't maintain its ambiguity, and that may annoy some people. Sounds like me.
Yeah, I think it doesn't. It doesn't. I think it gives you an ending, For like somebody like my mum that likes stuff to be explained, there's a nice, neat, here you go. But if you dig deeper into it, I mean, I think I've watched it like 4 or 5 times now, and I sort of have a different reading on it. I still haven't quite got there, but it's starting to make a bit more sense, and it's starting to be more than just the sum of the parts that are presented. It is trying to say something with that, but if you were just to watch it the once and wanted an ending, it's there. It's not the best, but if you sort of revisit it and delve into it, there is a lot more beneath the surface waiting to be found. But
yeah, I mean, maybe I should be more forgiving of it for a second layer after you said that as well, because I remember going back to Kill List the first time I saw that, and the ending just happens. It's like, what is this? Why is it suddenly become this completely separate thing? Mm-hmm. But when you go back and watch it, it's seeded an awful lot of visual clues throughout it.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any of them in Come True, but if there is, I think it might work.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that as well, once you get into it, it also explains away the relationship that people are having issues with, because of where it is happening. It's bound by different rules to societal norms, and the motivations behind it. But I mean, for me, I watched it as part of Fantasia when it screened there, and it is the scares. I was genuinely unnerved and pretty terrified watching it, because it has all of these dream sequences, and they're all these weird, warped, Geiger, Clive Barker-esque shadowy figures, and it's like black on black on black, and the camera's constantly pushing you forwards. So very much like when you're dreaming, you can't look away, you can't turn away, you're constantly being pushed towards something. And the music is really creepy and sinister. And I think when I first watched it, it just reminded me of dreams that I have had on like a subconscious level. And I remember sort of like saying to my husband, like, I don't like this film. I don't want to watch this film. I don't want to review this film. And then 20 minutes later, it's like living its best sort of like 80s Terminator, Donnie Darko vibes with an awesome soundtrack. And I was all in. And now I think it's genuinely one of my favorite films like ever. I just love the film. So
I will say, just going back on the jump scare, closest it gets is it goes to that moment when you just walk up and you think you see something up the corner of your eye. There's a scene with this creature just made out of legs, which is an image, all right. But I think that's the closest it gets.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's really creeping and insidious, and I think I really like it. It's one of these movies that I do think I need to see again, because the first time, again, going back to Kill List, I hated it the first time, but second time, third time, it just really pulled itself together quite nicely.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great low budget film. I mean, Anthony Scott Burns, he directs it, he wrote it, he did the cinematography for it, he edited it, and he also composed all the music, because he's a composer of working under the name Pilot Priest in his other job. So like everything that he can possibly have control over, he's got control over. The only thing he didn't have control over was how limited his budget was. I think their crew was like less than 20 people. And it's also produced by the director of Cube and Splice. So it has that sort of his weird influence on it as well. I think particularly the dream sequences is where like they sort of lent on him. So yeah,
Vincenzo Natali, is it?
Yes. But yeah, it's definitely, if you haven't seen it, you know, I heartily recommend you watch it. Even if you end up hating it, that's fine. That's what films are there for. You know, they're there for discussion. But I do think it's good to support these low budget indie filmmakers, because one day, you know, I mean, Cameron was seen as an indie filmmaker when he made The Terminator. So, you know, one day these people are going to be Camerons and Spielbergs and that. So why not get in at the ground floor?
I mean, I look at Benson and Moorhead. They're doing Disney Plus Moon Knight episodes, weird ones at that.
Yeah, I was pretty much sold on Come True as well. I've not seen it, but I certainly want to now. And then something you were saying was like, wait a minute, is it? Oh, cool, Canadian, because Canadian independent horror tends to click very nicely with me.
Yeah,
so,
it's one of those movies that you should watch. Like Kat said, even if you don't like it, it's really, really interesting. So, do we have anything else we want to mention before we wrap up for this week?
Well, on a home viewing just the other day, I rewatched Dune, which I had previously seen in the cinema. It was one of my top films of last year, and I did wonder, how is this going to work on TV? And you know what? Just as stunning and immersive on the small screen. This fantastic blend of this tactile world building and this almost ethereal kind of storytelling. So
I think that's where I did that movie wrong. I watched it through streaming and a VPN on my TV, so maybe I did it to service on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been, I've got a commission about Hellraiser because it's turning 35 this year. So I've just been deep into watching that and all of the bonus material. So I'm a sort of walking Hellraiser encyclopedia at the moment. So
that is my biggest, as a horror fan, that is my biggest sort of source of shame. Never seen a single one.
I've seen the first 3 and then the very last one because I was interviewing the director. But I think you can stop after 2 from what I've heard from most people.
There's about 12 now, isn't there? Something like that.
A lot. Yeah. I mean, Scott Derrickson, the guy who did Sinister and Doctor Strange, he directed one of them, and there's some reasonably big stars. I think Henry Cavill is in one of them. So they're sort of a lot of the films that a lot of people cut their teeth on. But yeah, after I myself have seen 1, 2, and 3 and then skipped to the end, but I know people that have gone through all of them and they will heavily recommend that you never do that because it falls off of a cliff after 3.
Too many franchises, that, unfortunately, I feel.
Rob, didn't you say there was something else you'd seen recently?
Well, just in passing, really. I'm doing a challenge, personal little letterbox challenge, where I'm filling in those gaps of horror movies, like the most popular horror movie from each year, going back to, I think, 1952 that I haven't seen.
All right.
And recently I watched Alice, Sweet Alice. I don't know if either of you are familiar with that one.
The name is familiar, yes. I think I may have heard it discussed on somewhere like the Evolution or the Faculty of Horror.
Brooke Shields, she's in it for about 10 minutes. Directed by Alfred Saul. It's called an American giallo, but I don't think it really is. I think it gets that reputation because it's got some POV shots.
Yeah,
it's like 1976, so it's pre-slasher. I think slashers really took off after Halloween, basically.
Aside from Black Christmas.
Yeah, nobody ever credits that one. I think Black Christmas is the superior movie, personally. Terrifying movie. But Alice, Sweet Alice is not what I really went in for. It's like 2/3 of a really psychological movie about Catholic guilt. And it just evolves, not seamlessly at all, into a slasher with an Italian housewife who did it. Sorry, I spoiled a 40-year-old plus movie.
The internet will not like that. They won't like that.
And it just doesn't work. The leap from one side to the other, it's just, hang on a minute, it's doing what now? And yeah, I can understand. It might be a case of like Come True. It's one of those movies, if you watch it multiple times, you'll see the signs, but I just don't think it. It's one of those horror movies where you've seen everything in the horror VHS star and you just want anything, so that'll do. It has that feel to it, which is a shame. But yeah, that's Alice, Sweet Alice.
Okay.
We all covered things we want to talk about today. Okay, excellent. So, Vincent, where can we find you and your work online?
You can find me by going to Twitter or Instagram or Letterboxd, and you will find me at Dr. Gain. That's DRGAINE. You can go to the Geek Show website to see some of the pieces I've written. You can also find reviews of mine on the Critical Movie Critics.
Excellent. And Kat?
So I am on Twitter and Instagram at Gizmo Shikari. That's a mashup of the cats' names. The bulk of my writing is on thehollywoodnews.com or at THNcom on Twitter. And I've just started to branch out into freelancing. So in a few months, there may or may not be some work by myself written in some forthcoming issues of Film Stories.
Excellent. And my guests in the main part of the show were Graham Williamson, filmmaker, writer and podcaster, who you can find on The Geek Show and Horrified Magazine, as well as his own podcast, Pop Screen, and and Aidan F, who's a veteran of podcasts with myself. You can find him on Letterboxd by searching for his name, Aidan F, or on Twitter at Doco and Drummer. And I have been your host, Rob Simpson, and that was Directors Uncut.